In the village of Labango, there was a woman named Adelia. She was as poor as the dusty ground beneath her feet. Her clothes were like old rags, full of holes and tears, barely covering her frail body. Her heart had become more of a shell than a home, hardened by years of struggle. The roof of her hut leaked whenever the sky cried, and the cold wind blew through the torn windows as if mocking her misery. Adelia had no bed. She slept on the hard, bare floor, curling up like a hungry cat to keep warm. Every night, she prayed for a better life, but the mornings always greeted her with the same struggle. She tried everything to survive, fetching water for others, washing their clothes, even working on their farms. But no matter how hard she worked, her hands always came back empty, as though the world had turned its back on her. Her childhood friends, the women she had once played with, were now married and living comfortably with their families. They wore fine clothes, and their children laughed and played around them. But Adelia? She had no husband, no children, no one to call her own. The villagers whispered behind her back, calling her cursed, born with bad luck. Even the men kept their distance, fearing her misfortune might rub off on them. Adelia's life was a tale of sorrow. She walked through the village like a shadow, unnoticed, unloved, and unwanted. Yet, despite everything, she carried on, hoping that one day the sun would shine brighter on her life. But that day had not come. Not yet. One hot afternoon, Adelia carried a bundle of tattered clothes to the river. The sun beat down fiercely, and the river sparkled like a pot of melted silver. She knelt by the water, scrubbing her rags with hands as rough as the village roads. The sound of the rushing water was the only comfort she had. As she washed, she heard the soft rustle of footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, her heart skipping like a frightened bird. Standing tall and proud before her was a woman dressed in clothes so fine they seemed to belong to a queen. Her skin glowed, her jewelry sparkled, and her smile was as sharp as a knife. "Good day," the woman said, her voice smooth like honey. Adelia blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. "Good day, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped closer. "My name is Kai," she said. "I've been watching you, Adelia. I know your struggles." Adelia's eyes widened. "How did you know my name?" she asked, confusion etched on her face. Kai smiled knowingly, as if reading her thoughts. "I have a business proposition for you. It's simple, and it will change your life," she said. Adelia stared at her, her mind spinning. What kind of business could this stranger have for her? Kai reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of crisp notes. "You will collect used panties from the village women," Kai said, handing Adelia the money. "Bring as many as you can, and for every load, I will pay you handsomely." Adelia's jaw dropped in shock. "Panties?" she asked, her voice thick with confusion. Kai nodded firmly. "Don't ask questions. Just do as I say, and you'll never be poor again." With that, she handed Adelia the money and turned to leave. "Remember," Kai said, "I'll be waiting." Adelia sat by the river, clutching the money in her hand. Her mind was clouded with questions. What kind of business was this? Why panties? She didn't understand, but the weight of the money in her hand was real. For the first time in her life, a spark of hope stirred in her chest. She packed her clothes and headed home, her heart beating like a drum. What would she do next? The next morning, Adelia woke up with a plan. She knew the villagers would grow suspicious if she only asked for panties, so she decided to make her trade seem ordinary. With the money Kai had given her, Adelia went to the market and bought colorful buckets and bowls, big and small. Each one gleamed under the morning sun. When she returned to the village, she went door to door, offering her new wares for sale. At each stop, she also discreetly asked for used panties, offering a little more money than usual to make her request seem less unusual. It worked. One by one, the village women handed her their used garments, and she quickly collected a sizable bundle. The weight of the panties in her bag felt different from the weight of the burdens she had carried her entire life. For the first time, She felt like she was in control of her own fate. Kai was waiting for her when Adelia returned to the river with her load. The woman's smile was wider than ever. "You did well," she said, handing Adelia more money. "Keep bringing them, and soon, you'll have everything you've ever dreamed of." Adelia didn't know what to think. She had started with nothing, and now she was being given the chance to change her life. But there was still so much she didn't understand. Who was this mysterious woman, and what was she really after? Would this business truly bring her happiness, or would it lead her down a path she couldn't return from? For now, though, all Adelia could do was continue. She had a taste of hope now, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. Tinu crouched lower, her breath catching in her throat as she watched Adelia approach Kai by the riverbank. The two women exchanged no words, but the air between them was thick with something unspoken. Kai sat with an air of elegance, as though the night was made for her, her rich clothes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Candles flickered around her, their flames dancing in a perfect circle, casting an eerie glow on the scene. Adelia dropped her sack of panties in front of Kai, her movements stiff, almost mechanical. Tinu could feel a strange shiver run through her as she observed the exchange. Something was not right. This wasn't just a simple trade. It was something deeper, something darker. She had to know what was going on. From her hiding place, Tinu watched as Kai handed Adelia a thick bundle of money. Adelia's face remained calm, but there was a hunger in her eyes, a hunger that Tinu had never seen before. She wasn't just collecting panties, she was collecting power, and this business was no longer about survival. It was something else, something sinister. Tinu's heart raced, and she felt a pull to confront them, but fear held her back. She knew that the villagers would never believe her if she told them about this strange, secretive exchange. No one would understand, and if Kai had the power to change Adelia's life so drastically, what else could she be capable of? As Adelia turned to leave, Tinu's curiosity got the better of her. She stepped out from her hiding place, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to approach Adelia, to ask her what this was all about, but before she could move, Kai's eyes flicked to her. They were sharp, piercing, like she had known all along that someone was watching. "Are you curious, little one?" Kai's voice was smooth and chilling. She didn't raise her voice, yet the words seemed to reverberate through the air. Tinu froze, caught in the grip of a fear she couldn't explain. I just want to know what's going on," she stammered. Kai smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Curiosity is dangerous," she said softly, "especially when you've already seen too much." Adelia, who had been walking away, paused and turned to look at Tinu. There was a blankness in her eyes, as though she wasn't the same woman who once struggled in the village. She was changed, not just in appearance, but in spirit. Tinu's thoughts raced. Was this the result of the money, of the strange trade that Adelia had entered? Was she truly beyond saving? Could she still be the woman she once was? "Go back to your village, Tinu," Adelia said, her voice cold and distant. "This is none of your business. You wouldn't understand." Tinu swallowed, her throat tight with the weight of the truth she was beginning to grasp. She had to get away, but she couldn't leave without understanding more. With one last glance at Adelia and Kai, she turned and fled into the night, her footsteps silent as she disappeared into the shadows. The village, so full of life and excitement for Adelia's newfound wealth, was oblivious to the darkness that now surrounded her. The next morning, Tinu couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. She watched from her window as Adelia went about her day, her clothes more vibrant than ever, her demeanor confident. The villagers marveled at her success, but Tinu knew the truth. Adelia's trade had become something more than just business. It was a dangerous game, one that would change everything for her and those around her. Adelia had found her way out of poverty, but at what cost? And what would happen when the darkness that Kai had introduced to her finally came to claim its due? Tinu couldn't help but wonder, would the village ever realize the true price of Adelia's success? Or would they too be consumed by the same dangerous allure? The silence in the village square was suffocating. The weight of Adelia's confession hung in the air like a thick fog, choking the life out of any hope. The villagers stood frozen, their faces pale, their eyes wide with disbelief and fear. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint rustling of leaves, as if even nature itself was holding its breath. Tinu, standing at the edge of the crowd, could barely comprehend what she had just heard. The truth was darker than anything she could have imagined. Adelia, the woman she had watched suffer for so long, had been part of something twisted, something far beyond her understanding. And now, it seemed, the entire village was at risk. The head elder, his face grim, turned to the chief priest. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. The chief priest's eyes, sharp and knowing, scanned the villagers, his hand resting on his staff like a symbol of power. "We must act quickly," the priest replied, his voice carrying a weight of authority that made the villagers shiver. "If what Adelia says is true, then the spirit she has been serving has grown too powerful. We cannot let it claim any more souls." The elder nodded, his mind racing. "We must banish Kentucky. She cannot be allowed to continue her rituals. We must find a way to destroy the power she has stolen." But as the elder spoke, the air grew even heavier, and a low, almost imperceptible hum filled the air. The villagers turned, startled, as a shadow moved across the village square, growing larger and larger. It was the figure of a woman, draped in dark, flowing robes, her presence unmistakable. Kai had come. Her smile was cold and calculating, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly fire. The villagers recoiled as she stepped into the square, her every movement radiating an unnatural calm. She seemed to glide rather than walk, her feet barely touching the ground. "I see you've learned the truth," Kai said, her voice like a serpent's hiss. "But it is too late now. Your souls have already been claimed." Gasps rippled through the crowd as fear swept through them like wildfire. Adelia, her body trembling, could barely look at the woman who had so completely ensnared her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know it would be like this." Kai's eyes flashed with amusement. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Adelia. And now you belong to me, just like all of them." The villagers were frozen in terror, unsure of how to react. The chief priest raised his staff, his voice booming with the strength of ancient power. "Begone, dark spirit. Your time is over." But Kai only laughed, a sound that chilled the bones. "You think you can banish me with your pathetic rituals?" she mocked. "I am beyond your reach, beyond your feeble prayers." With a flick of her wrist, the air around her shimmered, and the ground beneath the villagers' feet began to tremble. The priest's chants faltered, his voice shaking with the force of the dark energy Kai wielded. "Your prayers cannot save you," Kai whispered, her voice seeping into their minds. "You will all serve me, just as Adelia has. All of you." The villagers tried to move, but their bodies refused to obey. They were rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the overwhelming power Kai had summoned. Tinu, her heart hammering in her chest, felt a cold sweat drench her skin as she realized they were all at Kai's mercy. Adelia looked at her people, her heart breaking as she saw the fear in their eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice full of regret. "I never wanted this. I was just trying to survive." But it was too late. Kai's influence had already taken root in the village, and there was no escaping the darkness she had brought. The villagers had become her slaves, their souls no longer their own. As Kai's laughter echoed once more through the village, the world around them seemed to shrink, their fates sealed in the cold, dark grip of the ritualist's power. There was no turning back. And so, the village of Labango fell into an eternal night, its people consumed by the darkness, forever bound to Kai's will. And her face twisted in a snarl of fury. She had been caught, but she wasn't defeated yet. The villagers recoiled as she was dragged into the light, her body thrashing in the dirt, her eyes burning with malice. "You think you can stop me?" Kai spat, her voice thick with contempt. "You're all fools. I am eternal. This village, your souls. All of you will be mine." The priest stepped forward, his staff glowing with an ethereal light. "Your time is over, dark spirit," he declared, his voice steady and resolute. "The spirits of the land, the river, and the sky have already begun to turn against you. Your power has waned, and now we will cleanse this village of your curse." Kai laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that seemed to shake the very air. "You cannot banish me so easily," she sneered, her eyes narrowing. "I have woven my power into the fabric of this place. Even if you kill me, my curse will remain." The priest raised his staff high, his chant rising to a crescendo. The villagers held their breath, the tension palpable in the thick, oppressive air. The ground beneath them rumbled as if the very earth was alive, responding to the priest's words. Kai's laughter faltered, her expression darkening as she began to struggle, her body trembling under the force of the spell. "You will not leave this place," the priest said, his voice low but powerful, "until your soul is bound to the land you have tormented." With a final, forceful gesture, the priest slammed his staff into the earth, sending a shockwave through the village. Kai's body was lifted into the air, her hands outstretched as if trying to grasp at the very air itself. The villagers watched in awe and fear as the light surrounding her began to twist and warp. Her skin began to crack, as if the very magic that had kept her alive was being torn from her body. "Your power is nothing compared to the forces of nature," the priest intoned, his voice unwavering. "You will be returned to the earth where you belong." With one last, agonizing scream, Kai's body disintegrated into dust, her power dissipating into the wind like smoke. The light around her faded, and the night returned to silence. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. The villagers stood frozen, their hearts pounding in their chests, unsure if they had truly won. Then, slowly, the tension began to lift, and a murmur of relief spread through the crowd. "It is over," the priest said, his voice filled with quiet triumph. "The curse is lifted." The villagers exhaled in unison, their faces drained of fear but still marked by the toll the ordeal had taken. Adelia, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, felt a wave of relief wash over her. She looked at the villagers, her people, seeing them not as strangers, but as family, as part of her soul. She had led them down a dark path, but now they were free. The head elder stepped forward, his face somber. "Adelia," he said quietly, "you have paid a heavy price for your actions. But you have also helped us end this dark curse. We must rebuild, and we must do so with honesty and trust." Adelia nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I didn't want any of this," she whispered. "I was desperate. I didn't understand the cost. But now I do. And I will do whatever it takes to make things right." The villagers gathered around her, some offering soft words of comfort, others merely watching her with a mixture of sympathy and caution. The road ahead would not be easy for Adelia, but she had taken the first step toward redemption. The priest nodded approvingly as the villagers began to leave the clearing, their hearts lighter than they had been in weeks. As the night deepened and the last of the villagers made their way back to their homes, Adelia remained by the baobab tree, staring at the spot where Kai had disappeared. Her mind raced with thoughts of the past and what the future would hold. But one thing was certain: Lubango would never be the same again. The sun would rise on a new day, and with it, a new beginning for all of them. Her face twisted in rage and fear. "You fools," she spat, her voice hissing like a snake. "You dare defy me? You will all perish." The villagers recoiled, but the priest stepped forward, unfazed. He began chanting again, his staff glowing with a soft, otherworldly light. Kami screamed, clutching her head as if the words were searing her mind. Her power was slipping away. One by one, the villagers stormed into her lair, smashing the charms, candles, and strange artifacts scattered around. Each item destroyed seemed to weaken Kami further, her screams growing fainter with every shattered piece of her dark magic. Finally, the priest raised his staff high. "It is done," he declared. "She is powerless. The villagers dragged Kami back to the village square, where they tied her to the old tree in the center, the same tree where they once held joyous celebrations. Now, it bore witness to their darkest trial. "You have stolen from us," the head elder said, his voice heavy with anger. "You have cursed our people. Today, your reign of terror ends." Without hesitation, the villagers picked up stones. Their fear and rage fueled their actions. The air filled with the sound of rocks striking wood and flesh. Kami's screams echoed briefly before fading into silence. When it was over, the villagers stood in solemn silence. The witch who had caused so much pain was no more. The air felt lighter, and the square seemed brighter, as though the spirits themselves were relieved. The chief priest raised his hands. "The village is free," he declared. "But let this be a lesson. Evil thrives where greed and secrets grow. We must remain vigilant." The villagers nodded, their hearts heavy but relieved. They had won, but the memory of Kami's dark deeds would linger forever. Though her reign had ended, her curse had left scars on those closest to her. Sala and Tinu bore the weight of their choices. Tinu's bravery came at a cost, her sight. The morning after Kami's death, Tinu woke to darkness. The once bright world of Labango was now a void. She cried bitterly, unable to see the village she had fought so hard to save. Sala, too, suffered. Her legs, once strong enough to carry heavy loads, now barely supported her. Each step was painful, and her body trembled under the weight of her guilt. The villagers turned to the chief priest once more. He performed rituals, chanting and calling upon the spirits. Slowly, Tinu's sight returned. She blinked, tears of gratitude streaming down her face as the village came back into view. But for Sala, healing was not so simple. Though the priest tried, her legs remained weak. She limped before the villagers, tears falling freely. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Forgive me. I was blinded by greed and fear. I never meant to bring harm to you all." The villagers watched in silence, some with pity, others with anger. Sala's sorrow was deep, but her actions had almost destroyed them. Her shame grew too heavy to bear. Though the villagers no longer cursed her aloud, their cold stares and whispered words haunted her every step. She knew she could not stay. One morning, with nothing but a small bundle, Sala left Labango. She limped down the dusty road, her heart heavy. The village watched her go, their faces a mix of relief and sadness. Her name became a lesson, a warning of what could happen when desperation meets deceit. Parents told their children of Sala, the woman who traded their safety for riches. But while Sala left in shame, Tinu stayed and was celebrated. The villagers saw her as a hero. Her courage in following Sala had saved them all. Grateful, the king's son took Tinu as his wife. The village rejoiced, their hearts lifted by the union. Tinu's bravery was rewarded, and she became a symbol of strength and resilience. The story of Sala and the stolen panties became legend, shared around fires and under the moonlit skies. Elders told the tale to their children, warning them of the dangers of greed and hidden evil. Remember, they would say, evil often comes in the guise of opportunity. Though Labango returned to peace, the memory of those dark days lingered. The villagers remained wary of strange trades and mysterious figures. Sala's name lived on, not as a curse, but as a reminder of lessons learned. And so, the tale of the woman who traded panties for riches became woven into the very fabric of Labango, passed down through generations, ensuring the village never forgot the cost of their trust.